I don't really have any degree or anything special to be a zoning administrator, but I do have a lot of experience and I've been thrown into situations. But I think that is fairly typical of a lot of the zoning administrators in the rural parts of Nebraska. There's no special AICP designation or anything. So it can be a challenge, and there can be a lot of variance in how the zoning administrators approach this. I was zoning administrator when Elkhorn Ridge was built. It was the first private one in the state. When the developer walked in and said, "What do you have?" I said, "Nothing." And so anyway, I had help along the way. And then when David asked me to speak, I said, "I don't know a whole lot about solar." And so I'm learning, and I'm also learning some of the consultants do not know a lot, because my consultant is studying and trying to come up with some regs. So as you go through any of these processes, just be aware of that. If you're out in the rural areas, that may be more typical. Some of the trends that I see are there's more resistance than what there used to be, and maybe more of an organized effort against some of this, and it's the NIMBYs and the people that are believing all those facts that are out there on the internet, you know. And anyway, whether they're really facts or not. But anyway, I have been aware that out in Cherry County they have a project proposed, and there's a lot of resistance out there due to environmental concerns. I haven't had a lot of that in our corner of the state. We're up in northeast Nebraska, but we've had other concerns. And so in Antelope County, I kind of got thrown in the fire on that one. I was aware of it when I took it, but partly because I knew that most people that would be applying for that job would not have any experience, and it's not something for beginners. But anyway, I am seeing that setbacks are being increased, sound levels are being looked at. So those are a few things that would be coming up. As you're probably all aware, Lancaster County has some rather strict ones. And keep in mind, in Nebraska, we have local control because each locality is slightly different. And just because what something is applicable in Lancaster County might not be applicable in Antelope County, although if they are arguing to be more restrictive, they're trying to use that. But I've also seen a lot of issues that come with it that have been mentioned. I've heard them all. Some of the things are like the noise concerns, the infrasound. I'm not entirely convinced about that. I'm basically pro-wind, pro-solar, anything that helps with economic development in those rural areas. However, as a zoning administrator, I have to weigh both sides. I have to help both sides and try to remain neutral. Sometimes that's very difficult to do, though. And so I may come across to the developer, you know, totally different than the person that's opposing this. And so anyway, some of the views, some of the concerns that I've heard are the views. They don't like the looks of them. Zoning doesn't really regulate that. And I've heard it's just too large. There's too many. Well, in Antelope County, we do have quite a few turbines there, but part of that big equation is the transmission lines. There's a lot of transmission lines there. It's available, so that comes with it. And I just feel like it's not the Planning Commission's job to determine what is too large. You know, this is America, and that's all part of that American dream. We've had concerns about ice sling in the Elkhorn Ridge project and Crofton Bluffs project. Those have been up and running for a while. I have a lawyer that's on my planning commission who lives on an acreage right in the middle of all these towers, and so I was asking about it recently because of the Antelope County concerns. He said, Isling? I'm not sure if I've ever noticed that. So sometimes they make that out to be a bigger thing than what I think it really is. Of course, there's the NIMBYs and no tolerance for change. One of the things, too, that MPZA, which is Nebraska Planning and Zoning, has been warning us about in a totally different issue is exclusionary zoning. So if your area, county, whatever, is looking at making your regulations really restrictive, that you do need to be very careful with that, because there have been some court cases that say you can't be exclusionary. And what that means is, say in your regs, kind of what they were mentioning, yes, we allow these, but then have so many stipulations on them that it's just impossible to build them anywhere. That it's better just to say, no, they're not allowed, have it clear and concise. One of the other things that has been brought up a lot in Antelope County is trespassed zoning. Some of the consultants have never even heard of that. So we asked them, what exactly do you mean by that? And they consider trespass zoning is when a use has an effect beyond the property line, and it's trespassing on their property rights. Well, you know, there's all kinds of things in Nebraska that have an effect beyond the property line, whether it be noise or dust or view. You know, somebody with a house that's painted bright purple and people think it's ugly. You know, there's some things that zoning just, you know, we need to just stay away from that. So anyway, one of the unique things, or somewhat unique things, that I have not had to deal with in the past is in Antelope County, we have a project that's already built, and there are 4 neighbors that are not participating that have said they're just too loud. And this was all started before I became zoning administrator in March. And anyway, so that's been a really challenge for us, because what was decided before I started was that the company was going to pay for a noise study, and they got to choose who did that noise study. But because there was a certain amount of distrust in the area of anything of any size, and that because they were going to be paying for it, it would be unbiased, even though it was by a third party, they asked for a peer review. Also paid for this company, but anyhow. So, of course, these people that are complaining chose somebody to do the peer review who is very anti-wind. It's a well-known fact. And so we did the noise study. It showed that these towers were compliant. The peer review says the study was not done correctly. It's probably not compliant. And so we're going to not through this whole process yet, so it'll be interesting to see what the county board decides. It's in their hands right now. What they decide, if they want to believe the noise study itself, they're giving that engineer a chance for a rebuttal, or the peer review, if they need to do a third study. And, you know, where does this cycle end, too? And where is the burden of proof? Is it always on just the developer? Those are a lot of questions that remain to be answered. So if anybody has any advice, I'll gladly take it. But I guess one more comment I should say. As a zoning administrator, it's really typical when you have a hearing to hear the anti-side. So if you are in favor of whether it's wind, solar, anything, let your voice be heard. The planning commission, the county boards, they do like to hear both sides. So.
Thank you very much.